Good morning students, this is Priya, your science teacher. In this chapter I will explain you about force and pressure, that is chapter number 11 of your NCERT textbook. So in this chapter we will learn about the forces, the effects of forces, the types of forces that are act on a particular object, the relationship between the force and the friction, and the relationship between the pressure and the force. So let's start with the force. First of all, in this chapter we will understand the introduction of force, the effects of force, about the friction and the relationship between force and pressure. What is force? A force is a push or pull or both, we can say. A force cannot be seen but we can feel and observe the effects of the force. A push, it is a force to move an object away from our body, and pull is when we apply a force to move an object towards the body. So the combination of push and pull we can say it as a force. For example, playing a guitar, it is an example of a push or pull. It is sawing wood, scrubbing the floor and rowing a boat. So these all are examples of application of force. In this we can see the effects of the force in various type of objects. For example, pulling a box, this can change the position of the box. Raising a flag, opening the door, drawing back a bow, this is an example of a push or pull. Or the tug of war. So in all these examples, a push and a pull is happening on a particular object. So we can consider it as a applying force. The next are the effects of force. The effects of force are very random. It depends on the type of object. Force can change the shape of an object temporarily or permanently. It depends on what type of object, what type of material of an object is made of. It can stop a moving object or it can make a stationary object to move. It can change the speed of a moving object or it can change the direction of a moving object. So these are some examples in which the shape of an object is changed temporarily. Okay, for example, stretching a rubber band, pressing a sponge or squeeze a spring. In these type of objects, the objects that they return to their original shape and size after the force is applied. So these type of objects, we can say that these are elastic objects. In inelastic objects like glass, a can, after these objects, they will not return to its original shape and size after being squeezed or after being pressed or after being stretched, because these are inelastic objects. Okay? For example, dropping a glass, this can change the shape of the glass permanently. Tearing a piece of paper, this can also change the shape of the paper permanently. Crushing an empty can and breaking a glass, tearing paper. So these all are the examples of the effects of force on various types of objects. Sometimes children may have a misconception that a solid object cannot be compressed or stressed, but this is not so true. The shape of a solid object, it changes when a force is applied to it, but it depends on the type of object, that whether it's the size of the object, it changes temporarily or permanently. Example, crushing a can, it can change its shape permanently, but stretching of a rubber band, it can change its shape temporarily. The next is the relationship between the direction of force and the direction of motion. An object will move faster when the force is applied in the direction of the object, but it moves in the different manner if the force is applied on a opposite direction. For example, if we take an example of a wooden block, okay, if we apply two types of forces on the same direction, then the net force happening on an object is 5 Newton, and this box will move towards the right hand side. But if we apply two magnitude of forces, that is 5 Newton and 2 Newton in the opposite direction, then the net force will be the difference between these two types of forces, that is 3 Newton, and this wooden block will move towards the force of the higher magnitude. So it depends on the direction of force, whether the object have to move slowly or fastly, or whether the direction of the object is left hand side or the right hand side. But sometimes children may have this misconception that a force is need to keep an object moving with a constant speed. This is not very true. You do not need forces to move at a steady pace, but if you keep the same speed yet change direction like a moon around a planet, then you have a force acting on you anyway. For example, in this picture you can see the direction of force and the direction of motion. A stationary ball, it will move when it is kicked because it moves in the same direction as the applied force. But the moving ball, it will stop when an equal force is applied in the opposite direction of its motion. So this is how the direction of force and the direction of motion are interdependent on. Some people think, some children, they have misconception of about that force, it is the property of an object, and an object has force, and when it runs out of force it stops moving. This is not true. As you all know the Newton's first law, that an object at rest or in motion will remain in that state unless or until an external force is applied to the object. So force is not the property of an object, it is depends that whether the force is acting on an object or. The next is that what is friction and how it depends on the how the force and friction, they are interdependent terms. Firstly, friction, it occurs when the two surfaces are moving in contact with each other, as in the case of the applied force. Friction, it depends on the physical condition of the surface, that whether the surface is rough or whether the surface is smooth in nature. Second, it depends on the weight of an object, that if the weight of an object is very high and it is a heavy weight object, then the friction will increase. But if the weight of an object is very light, then the friction will increase. So it depends on these two factors. In our daily lives, we face various advantages and disadvantages about because friction, it occurs basically because of the interlocking between the two surfaces or the irregularity that is present between the two surfaces. So sometimes because of friction, the some movement of an object, it slows down because of the friction. So a moving object will slows down, like rolling of a ball, it slows down after some time because of the friction of the floor. Sometimes it causes the surface of the objects to wear out, it causes less effectiveness of moving machine, it causes heating, sometimes it causes sound pollution, and sometimes the friction, it increases the cost when worn out objects need to be replaced with the new ones. So these are some disadvantages that we face in our daily lives due to friction. But friction helps us in various ways in our daily lives. For example, it enables people to run and walk without falling or slipping on a floor, and it enables us to write on a paper because the friction between the pen and paper will help us to write. It enables a car to stop when the brakes are applied due to the friction. It enables an object to be stationary. Music instruments can produce sound because of friction. It allows vehicles to travel on the road without slipping because of friction. But there are various ways by which we can reduce the friction in case of very smooth surfaces. For example, we can use ball bearing, we can use wheel and axle, use lubricants such as grease or oil, and use air cushion or roller bearing, so that the disadvantages that we come across due to friction, they can be reduced. So this is about the friction, the factors that affects the friction and the disadvantages and advantages of friction on our daily. So you should know about the correct statement about the friction. That friction is only present when something is rubbing against a moving object. This is not so true. Friction occurs when the two surfaces are moving in contact with each other. They are in physical contact with each other. Then we can say that the friction is acting between them. These are some examples of friction. For example, holding a glass is because of the reason of the force of friction. We can rub a surface because of the force of friction. We can light a matchstick because of the friction. So these are some daily life examples of. The next is the relationship between a force and a pressure. First, you should understand that what is pressure. Pressure is basically force per unit area. Okay, and next that is air pressure or atmospheric pressure. Okay, so if we take an example of a gas cylinder, then the weight of the gas cylinder is exactly equal to the air pressure or the atmospheric pressure that is applied on the cylinder. So this is the air pressure that is applied on a. So this tells that what is atmospheric pressure. It is basically the pressure that air exerts on us is known as the atmospheric pressure. Like you can see in the example that the air pressure, it is the pressure that is exerted on the tubes of the bicycle. So air exerts pressure on the walls of the tube. Simply liquids, they exert pressure on the walls of the container they kept in it. For example, a water bottle, if we made a hole in a water bottle, then water will squeeze out, because water, it exerts pressure on the walls of the container of the bottle. Next, in the second picture, you can see that we apply a push or a force that is applied to the pump to produce the air pressure. So air pressure or pressure and a force is a very different term to use. I hope you have understood the difference between the pressure and force very well. This is your 11. I hope you have understood it very well. Thank you.